Hey, everybody. Welcome to Live on KEXP at Home. I'm Derek Mazzoni, and it's a pleasure to be here right now with everybody as we celebrate music and artists. And on this particular KEXP Live at Home, we are doing a special edition called Immigrant Songs, where we focus on immigrant musicians living in the United States and in a way to tell their stories. Huge shout out to the Vilchuk Foundation, who are helping us making these immigrant songs possible. So let's go back in time a little bit. It feels like it was a whole other world, but pre-pandemic, the current administration was doing some saber rattling about Iran. And as this was happening, I decided to focus my show, Wopop, on that particular day, on music of Iran, because I find that when the sabers start rattling, it's important to play music and celebrate various cultures so that maybe the sabers can be put away. As I was looking around for different artists, from Iran to play. There's a bunch of great stuff that was in the 60s and 70s, pre-revolution, etc. But there's some really interesting music that's been coming out of Iran for a while now, specifically hip-hop, electronic music, rock, and other forms. And one of the artists that I discovered is Iranian's first female MC. Her name is Salome MC, and she's amazing. And here she is with us right now. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Now, we kind of discovered each other in a really interesting way because you are living in Seattle. So when I was looking for you, I thought you would be many different places, but I didn't really realize that you were so nearby, which made this whole process even more wonderful, because you're continuing to work, you're continuing to create amazing music, and now at your role, you are also looking at how to support various artists, specifically female MCs throughout all of North Africa, literally all over the world. And as I dug a little deeper in your work, I saw that you've been collaborating with a bunch of different artists from all over the world. Your story is interesting. So you came from Iran to Japan, and from Japan to the United States. And so that's a really interesting way to go through this particular immigrant experience. I saw that you worked with Japanese hip-hop artist Shingo2 on a piece of work. We had Shingo2 at KEXP a little while ago. So you're still inspired. You're continuing to make really powerful, potent music. And your first experience of American culture from a hip-hop perspective was through hip-hop, and it was through some pretty potent videos. Can you speak to that a little bit? How did what was your take on the U.S. when you were living in Iran, and then what happened when you got here, or when you left Iran and you saw a broader perspective?
Let's just speak about just recently things that were happening. I've been living here for almost 4 years now, so I came in 2016. And a lot of the American culture we've already very familiar with through entertainment industry that is coming and being shown all over the world. We kind of grow up with American music, American shows, movies, so some parts of it is not new. But for me specifically, also, especially in these last few months when the BLM movement and a lot of protests that were happening and a lot of conversations were being had just recently, I was thinking, I know all these things, but how do I know? I'm meeting all these people who have been born and lived in America all their lives, and they are surprised by these things, but I know I'm an Iranian person and I have been living here for 4 years. How do I know? And just thinking back, I realized, wow, I've been actually hearing these things from hip-hop artists who've been talking about these things since 80s. And that was an interesting revelation to me. I mean, I didn't really think about that, but I just kind of came to know American culture and what's happening domestically as well as internationally when it comes to foreign policy through hip-hop and also obviously other resources. But I think I've had a very interesting way of learning by just listening to these artists.
So you went to school. How old were you when you left Iran?
I was 25.
Okay, so you're a fully formed adult,
Yeah.
and you have been living in Iran throughout the entire, post-revolution. That's your Iranian experience. It isn't really tied to like pre-revolution or anything like that, So, and as we talked about before, there's a huge Iranian population all over the United States. And if you look at someplace like LA, that's part of the culture of the city. And there is, of course, a lot of cultural exchanges that are going on there. And we spoke about this where you started every morning with, a chant, death to America, death to America. But at the same time, there is this deep understanding and a love affair because there's such a huge expat population of Iranians in the U.S. and throughout the world. How did those two come together?
When you live in a society that information is heavily controlled, like Iran and many other places, I think you kind of become really skeptic about what's coming from the official channels. So even though we grew up hearing a lot about, what has Americans been doing and interfering with Iranian affairs and generally in the Middle East, I think a lot of people just because of the the nature of the Iranian government, just at some point just starting to turn a blind eye to all of that and kind of develop this reverse psychology. It's just like so what, and it's kind of become really hard to being able to stay objective and say that, yes, these things are wrong, even though the Iranian government is saying it, we have to acknowledge that it is a truth, these other things are not true. And those nuances are, unfortunately, when tensions are high, when feelings are high, and a lot of injustice is happening, is really easily disregarded. And that's something that's happening in here too, because, again, whatever this administration is doing now, even if there is something that could be good, is just kind of completely disregarded too, understandably, because there's so many, shit is happening that is not good for the many people and for America in generally. So just being able to pick and choose and just stay objective and not be consumed by these feelings of rage and anger and grudge is really hard. And a lot of people are not able to do that. And I was really fortunate. I grew up in a journalist family. My dad was a war journalist. He's retired now, but we moved around a lot. My mom's a writer, so I was lucky to be able to develop some critical thinking. And even though I also, those feelings take over a lot of times, but I try to stay neutral. So for me personally, it has been that, okay, I look, read, despite if this information is coming from official channels, I definitely dissect what's going on, but I don't disregard it immediately just because I disagree with everything else they're saying.
Got it. So, so we're both immigrants, and we both have come from countries that had at particular times a very difficult relationship with the United States. I came up from a communist country, you came from Iran, and one of the things that really strikes me about this, and I see this right now, especially with other places that have difficulties with the United States, is that there's no nuance. The propaganda is so simplistic that there's no place for subtlety or for historical perspective or even a modern perspective. It's like bad, good. Now, it's interesting to me when I discovered your work is that you're a hip hop artist, you're a graffiti artist, you're an anti-militarist, you're presenting this messaging, and we're talking about BLM. As you said, it started in the 80s. Hip hop artists have been talking about white supremacy, and we're talking about oppression for a long time. But that is the message, that's the image that the Iranian government would like its population to think is what's going on in the United States. I'm not saying it's not, but it's like there's no nuance. I talk to friends that are like, so the Nazis are running the country. It's like, no, not exactly. There's nuance there, but propaganda isn't subtle. It doesn't work subtle. It's pretty just raw. So even when I tell people there's a hip hop scene in Iran, they're like, it's just too twisted for them to really comprehend that. But it is. And so one of the things that we want to do with this project and also with your story is we got to present that nuance. We got to present that the complexity of that story, because the militarists are going to start saber rattling again. This isn't going to stop because it's a broader geopolitical power play between two cultures, between many they all should be in one room together and just like figure that out. But it's going to continue. So being a musician, being an activist, being a writer, being who you are, and representing, even more so, representing women in this powerful role is so vital right now, because it really twists the current paradigm in a really interesting way, and so it's a lot to land on you, but at the same time, you're here now, and your work speaks to that, and also speaks to that for other artists, other female artists in North Africa and beyond. That's a lot to carry, but you're not, you don't seem to be bored. You don't seem to be overwhelmed by it. You're continuing to make music. You have a single coming out. When is that coming out?
It's coming next week, September 15th. So, if you're interested, check it out. It's a collaboration with Tunisian rapper, also a female, Medusatian, who she's also an immigrant and is living in Paris right now.
Perfect. Let's hear some music first, and then we'll go back into this.
Live for KEXP by Salome MC. Most of my songs are gonna be in Farsi, but there are subtitles for you down there.
35 ساله که در کار کاغذ با دل کردنم پاره میشه جوابا افکاری که تحت افساره دیکتاتور درون، یا میخواد حکم کنه یا میخواد بده آزادی رو دست خود کامه. تک تکمون مهره دستگاه ولی در کمون نشسته مغزگاه به گاه میره میگه استثنا، در حالی که میرم فصلا. آره تو تکی ولی جز 60 نیست، حرکتی تو فیلتر اینستات نیست، برکتی دیوارای قطرا ویلاها. میرم بالا میام پایین فیلها با هواپیما. میگن از دست تا اون سیستم خواهن شد داغون، ولی قارون نمیده تاون چون کف صابون. فاضلابه طالع آرمانی که فاضلابه فاز نابه قصده و از جنبشای وابسته نسبتای اصم گسسته که سر و تایشون وصله به یه دستگاه که تباه هست. شاخم بشه باز میشه رو سر من و تو. بین 6 دیوار نشستی منحصر چه امواجی در خازنه این میکروفون مستمه. اگر نباشی نیست خیالی، تنها حالی که یادت میمونه لب فشرده و مشتمه. For 35 years now I've been wasting paper, ink tasting safer, a flavor when thoughts are tapered is labor. Less silence, truly an action. What about stillness? What if I binge watch this traction, corporate herrings in reaction to chaos gaining traction? The stillness just a fraction of the distress, cause we all feel less and less. Benevolence failed test. A neck tyrant will not rest till it dominates and irrigates, or turns into an apostle of a primate it venerates. We propagate the same machine that subjugates us into fiends for profligate while suffocating, running in a circle, ovulating, bolts and nuts, stuck in a rut while the castle walls go up and up to an obscene level until all dreams come down in one shot. بین 6 دیوار نشستی منحصر چه امواجی در خازنه این میکروفون مستمه. اگر نباشی نیست خیالی، تنها حالی که یادت میمونه لب فشرده و مشتمه.
All right, Salome MC. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So many questions. So let's go quickly into just one. You've been in Time Magazine. You've got an amazing reputation. You're continuing to build work and speak for a generation, continuing to work with Iranian artists. From an immigrant perspective, that's very interesting because often, especially when you leave country as an immigrant, sometimes you're done. You leave. You've left. You're going to focus on what's happening here. And also sometimes when you leave, the other country is kind of like trapped in time. You're not part of the everyday things that are going on. But because you're an artist and because you're an activist in this way with your art, you still have a very strong connection to what's been going on in Iran. Tell me what's been going on.
First, let me say this. It's inevitable that the connection dwindles and it takes another form. And that's just not only inevitable, but in a way it could be good because I get here and now I have access to new resources and I have a different type of connection, but I can use that and bring different type of things to the table. That's one. I want to start by saying that, I mentioned I grew up in 3 different countries because of my dad's work in Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Iran, and each were kind of, even though maybe looking from here, they kind of similar. They weren't, especially back then, because Azerbaijan just had came out of the Soviet Union, and Turkey was going through this turmoil of trying to be really secularists. So they were kind of just shutting down any public representation of any religion in a very conservative society, which really backfired afterwards. And then you had Iran, which was the opposite and was kind of trying to enforce religious values to a population that not necessarily some agree, some didn't. Some agree, some didn't. So kind of just growing in these 3 different types of places, I kind of developed this thing where the notions of where you come from and where you live and what is homeland, things like that have become very fluid and not necessarily very concrete in my mind. And that became a part of my identity that way. So when I moved from Iran to Japan, it was, I didn't necessarily think of it as a big move. I even moved inside Iran to a city, lived into a city in north, which no one does that. No one goes from Tehran and works and lives in a smaller city. But it was natural to me to experience that. And then next step for me was Japan in 2010. It was never they were all kind of fluid motions and just following each other. And I didn't feel that having that big immigration experience that everything is altered and it was all, and especially with my artwork, it was also, I always felt like just the production of it, both from a perspective of just logistics, how I made it. I usually have been pretty independent of how I make it, always had a home studio, and also just how I do it creatively has been also pretty independent of locations. So all of that, I think, contributed to the fact that I just find it natural in me to work wherever I go, find ways of expressing and kind of taking whatever there is in my environment and then mixing it with what I have brought with myself and then presenting it to the world.
But you're singing, you're presenting in Farsi.
Yes.
And so that is representational of your culture, definitely. You're also mixing different languages, which is very, it's a 21st century perspective. It's almost like you're seeing what could be in the future through this work, where you have your cultural identity, but it doesn't have to be wrapped up in your political identity. That's my take on it. It's like we can work together in many different forms, but you're dealing with also gender issues, and now, it's in a lot of these cultures in Iran, a woman rapping, a woman singing on television or on screens. That's a difficult process, a difficult thing to do. But
it's impossible. Pretty impossible. Yeah.
But you're able to do that right now, and you're presenting it. And I'm not saying you're able to do that right now because you live in America or you moved or presented anything like that. But it is a way to take that immigrant experience and have it transmutate into some new forms as as things are open. And I want to go to the next song, but I want to speak about this one thing. Your experience of America in some ways have been through these hip-hop videos and these artists who are African-American artists that are singing or that are presenting a particular kind of experience that doesn't exist in Japan, doesn't exist in Iran. You know, that was your first take on the African-American experience. Now, you're here now, and you're seeing this African-American experience come from the 80s to full, I don't say bloom, but it's like what we hope is a deeper global understanding that this stuff has to stop and it has to be present right now. But you didn't grow up in that kind of environment, and this is all brand new. So I just would love like a quick take, like how did that work in your mind? Because I have my story with that. We'll share that later. But how did that work in your mind, where it's just like, oh, this is the way this is, or not, or help me here?
One thing I like to say that when I listen, grew up listening American hip hop and really connected with it. It's true that it was mostly speaking about specific African American experience, maybe in America, but also I think a lot of the conscious rappers that I was listening to, what they were saying, if they were talking about an oppressive system, a lot of things in there was really, is it relatable to me? Because I lived in an oppressive system. So when you have systemic oppression, tactics are pretty similar, they kind of like pretty clear cut, their rules, and you see that. So when I'm listening, I'm like, oh yeah, like I could find and relate to it and see that in my own society. So it wasn't necessarily, in different form, but you can see that the big logic, the big picture is pretty similar in certain ways. So there was that. It wasn't completely like something that I was hearing about this other country that I eventually ended up with. I was listening and I was taking in it and understanding it, and I was seeing different forms of it in my immediate environments.
Okay. So it's the tools of the oppressor aren't that really different. It's the same process, one way or the other. Fascinating. Let's hear another song and let's talk some more. Salome MC, live at KEXP, at home.
ایستادم دستی روی سرم میخواند حکایتی از خاری دختی که آمود تا زانویم هم نیست این کهنه لباس سفید روزه باد موسمی چک بارون غرف به نام مقابله به منظره عبرت قافله بزن از این خروج دیگه نیست بالین پر قلبی شکست و غروری به فکر رفت مغزی درشناک کف پاش صافتر یکی بود یکی نبود قصه بخور شد یکی زد یکی خورد خیال قبور شد ایستادم با داغی رو سینم از قلب دریدم مجاور تیغم شهرتی کلبیم زعبی من نیست دیگر هیچ غیر میخ سلا بخرید از این اختر را رفاقت گرگا و آتشه بیفرید الف به نام مقابله به منزله عبرت قافله بزن انداختی نمیبخشم ولی فراموش میکنم جایی که نره باقی در آغوش میکنم If I'm living with the shame I live with my unchosen name شکافی جاوید بر خرقه لکه موسرو قماش باورم
Salome MC. That was beautiful. I don't know what's the word for it. Beautiful. Which leads me to this other point. We live in a social media age right now where it's so easy to criticize an artist such as yourself from a cultural, from a gender perspective. It's so easy to find people who will even just try to find the one thing that's wrong and just focus on that, not even seeing the, a misspelling or something just utterly stupid. And you're creating work like that, which is so raw and so needed. As an artist, as a woman from Iran, and as a woman in the world right now creating work, how do you keep yourself together to continue to build on that?
I also obviously have good and bad days. I think anyone has. So sometimes I don't. I just fall apart. It's quite, but when I think it's quite necessary in the process of creation anyway. So it works, and then I build myself up and then channel that into some work, which hopefully will do something and create some kind of change, and then rinse and repeat and cycle, and that just keeps going, and it I think I don't know if it's called lucky or what, but because I've been making conscious music from the early on, and there isn't a huge market for this kind of thing. So people who follow me and are actually interested in what I do mostly are people who don't go overboard with critique or So I'm lucky and kind of maybe a little bit sheltered from that, because I don't have celebrity, I don't have that huge fame, and I like to point out that people who me and a few others started hip hop scene in Iran in early 2000s, and people who started off with me, they are all superstars now. They're my friends. They're superstars. It's great, but the type of I branched off and I chose a certain path that doesn't end there. So there is obviously the downside is you don't have a huge platform, but the positive side is your platform is very tight and supportive, and they know what you're talking about.
What is your relationship right now with your audience in Iran? How do people find you? Speak to that a little bit if you can.
So from very early on, when we started, hip hop in Iran was strictly online. There was no performing anywhere. And I'd say this, when we were doing that and putting everything online, this is when first MySpace was kind of becoming a thing. It's just in the whole world. Yeah. But in Iran, we kind of went all in with the idea that music just strictly online. Your distribution is online, your fans are online, the way you interact with your fans are online, your existence and your platform as an artist is pretty much online, which is something that we see now all over the world now. It's kind of became a very popular thing with SoundCloud and all the other streaming platforms and everything, but it wasn't back then. But it was for the hip-hop scene because we didn't have the real world platforms. So that hasn't changed. It started that way, and the way it works is you just, in the early on when we started, I don't know if you know this, but there was first it was Yahoo groups, that people that we had like Iranian hip hop Yahoo groups, and people who liked it will come there and will share music in there. And then there was this social media platform called Orkut, which I don't know. I think it wasn't that popular in the western part of the world,
but it was huge.
It was huge, and that was basically how Iranian hip hop scene grew, became popular. And then now there is just social media, Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud. People find each other, and there's lots of also Iranian websites that put your work up and kind of promote and create this conduits between fans and artists.
And it's in Farsi or Urdu. And it's interesting to me because this is one of the things comes up is that people, everybody out there right now, this is huge. It's not small. It's not this little tiny boutique or anything like that. This is because you have to understand also the Iranian expat population is huge also. And so it's like one of those things that, when I speak to it, it's just like people are just shocked. They're like, really? This thing exists? And this happens a lot when you travel, when you either through an immigrant experience, or if you're lucky enough to actually leave the country and go see what other places are like, you just see how simplistic the messaging that you're getting about other places, unless it's overly romanticized, it's just, it feels like there's such a great opportunity for people to get to know each other, but get to know each other in a really complex, intriguing way. And your work and others are at the vanguard of that, because once you know, you cannot not know. You can, like, just the complexity and range of musical expressions, and there's the same parallel. There's the same. It's more subtle. Your work is pretty clear, but I've also heard others where it's more of a metaphor, almost like Persian in poetry. You get it; it's kind of the same message, but it's not like direct.
Yeah, I did different types. Yeah.
And you're still an opportunity to share that with others. So you're doing this. You're working with a Tunisian female rapper right now. What other artists are out there right now that you're hearing and you're seeing? And I want to also focus on the immigrant experience. Could you actually have collaborated with this artist if you were still in Iran?
I think so. Yeah. Because pretty much all the collaborations that I've done, other than actually Shingo one that you mentioned, that was we're physically in the same environments. But other than that, pretty much all of them was done over internet.
Okay, so that could happen anywhere, anytime. You're not dealing with limitations on that.
No.
That you're finding interesting.
No, it has its own limitations, but it has its own also freedom. So it's kind of give and take. But also that's what I started making music. That's the type of, everything was again online based.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of that's what I'm comfortable at, and that's how I've continued doing it also. I'm open to obviously being physically together and doing it, but
not right now.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, exactly. So
everybody's online right now. Let's hear another song. Let's keep talking. Salome MC, live at KEXP, at home. 45 تا 50 دقیقه دارم باید از جام پاشم برم سر یخچال از سرچی که هستش بپزم شام نشست از وقتام رو بزیر کهنه های پاچه ای و لکه های شیر موهای سرکف زمین تارن کبود بوی سیر زخم شکم پای کبود استخون های یکی بودم دوتا شدم آفریدم خدا شدم از کمرم دولا شدم بیخواب مثل خولا شدم یکی بودم دوتا شدم آفریدم خدا شدم خسره هام از هم جدا شدم Let it go cause any second now it's gonna ولش کن هرا ممکنه بگه جانا Let it go cause any second now it's gonna ولش کن هرا ممکنه بگه کار زیاده واسه انجام تیست از چاقی زنجانیم درد سزار یندافه جامه فکر برنجام مثل برجامه تیک تاک تیک تاک سنجاق به دست بدوز بشور بپس بزن سینه بسنگ بجم با ساعت یکی بودم دوتا شدم آفریدم خدا شدم از کمرم دولا شدم بیخواب مثل خولا شدم یکی بودم دوتا شدم آفریدم خدا شدم خسره هام از هم Hurry up cause any second now it's gonna بودو که هرا ممکنه بگه جانا Hurry up cause any second now it's gonna بودو که هرا ممکنه بگه Keep calm, enjoy the right, do not define, no need to fight the instincts of a goddess A distinct and a flawless raw voice in your mind telling you life is life happening now No reruns, no streaming online, is it your said then done When not down, I'm on the run If not nesting, I'm feeling bad for resting Living tiny cycles, plan the next thing Manifesting postpartum anxiety, doctors infesting neural pathways in variety, and I am destined to feel like an immigrant in my own new body for ideally 12 months. Sleep deprived day nights piled up like stretch marks, blood clot in left lung, both eyes bruised and lesions, inject blood threads with precision, grotesque vision in sync with the C-section incision. None of it matters, there's no time for indecision. Hurry up cause any second of is gonna برو که هر آن ممکنه بگه جانا. Hurry up cause any second of is gonna برو که هر آن ممکنه بگه. Let it go cause any second of is gonna ولش کن هر آن ممکنه بگه جانا. Let it go cause any second of is gonna ولش کن هر آن ممکنه بگه.
Salome MC, live at KEXP at home, part of Immigrant Songs. I'm Derek Mazzoni. You can find me on KEXP. I do a show called War Puppets every Tuesday, online anytime you want it. I'm here with multimedia artist, rapper, writer, the whole shebang. And did you just sample your baby?
Yes, I did.
Awesome.
I did. He was making all the different sounds. I'm like, I have to.
You've got to. And also, that's great. It's great because it's like your work is very, this is simplistic, macro and micro. You know, like a song like that where you draw the parallels to you're an immigrant in your own body. It's amazing and awesome work in representing that. Like a lot of artists just wouldn't be able to do that. It's so you have a unique ability to go from here to here and put that out. So well done. Let me speak to that for a second, if I may. If you grew up in Tehran, you moved when you were 25. Your first stop is Japan. Now, that's a very unique culture in many ways. And and it's a culture that doesn't really have much of an Iranian population. If you ended up in anywhere in the United States, mostly, there would be a scene. There'd be something going on there. But in Japan, not so much. So you really went to a very, what was that like, going from Iran to Japan?
So I lucked out and I went to a city called Sendai, which is not too big, not too small. When I left Tehran, I was ready to live a little bit the ultimate urban life, which is Tehran, gray walls, rush hours, people everywhere. And I loved it. It's what shaped me, urban life, but I wanted something different. And I ended up in a city that wasn't too big and wasn't too small, which is something also I experienced and I also don't like. And Sendai was great, but the first year it was just kind of, I went there, I got a scholarship, education scholarship to do my master's degree, and the first year is just all about learning Japanese and just learning and settling in. And then after that first year, there was the East Japan earthquake in 2011. I'm sure. Wow. Yeah, some remember. Yeah. And Sendai was the epicenter of it, the city that I lived in. And then there was tsunami, which wiped up the whole coast and lots of human losses. And after that, my Japan experience pretty much was shaped with that experience all the way through. Because after that, everything I did, the type of artwork I produced, the type of collaborations I did, the type of projects I was drawn to was shaped by that experience. So it's also a kind of a unique thing. Probably would have been really different if that hasn't.
If it was chill.
Earthquake that hasn't happened. Yes.
So, but that's an interesting experience because you're sharing that with everybody else there. So it really isn't. And correct me if I'm wrong. It's not an opportunity for you to kind of like celebrate your difference. You're all going through this war zone and you're all trying to figure out how you're going to survive. I mean, it wasn't like, we all felt it. We all were like, what just happened? But to be there and from a different place altogether and to suddenly, being in that kind of environment you're an artist, must have influenced your work quite a bit. How did it?
This is something generally about Japanese culture too, which I got immersed in after that experience more. The fact that everything is temporary and appreciate that and really feel it. That kind of philosophy is ingrained in Japanese society, and the aesthetics, the art, the architecture, everything. So I think that shaped just generally my philosophy in life, and just also things that I did, that just knowing that everything is temporary and that's fine. And in fact, it can be beautiful.
Yeah. It's called wabi sabi, right? That's
wabi-sabi, yes.
Do you still is that philosophy still part of the way you work and the way you conduct yourself?
Yes, for sure. I mean, okay. I think it got to a point where I don't even think about it. But I try to keep lifestyle simple. I know what I like in life. I know what makes me happy, and I just try to stick to them. I don't make things complicated. Try to anyway. But you're a mom. You're a mom. You're an immigrant. You're living in a pandemic world. So obviously, things get overwhelming, and then you're also living in a world where there's the constant threat of war in your home, where you're coming from and where your family lives. So it is obviously gets overwhelming all the time, every second. So that's that. Putting that aside, but so to make it a little bit simpler, I just stick to, what I know, things that have been tried, and just don't make it complicated for myself.
And then you ended up in America. You ended up in a culture which is the dominant culture on many levels on the planet, which is always an interesting experience for an immigrant coming here, because you see it, and you see it on many different levels. It's everybody out there right now. You cannot escape American culture. Not even just Western culture, but just American culture. It is pervasive. You could be in the most obscure part of the world. You see it in North Korea. It's there. And so when you're in it right now, what were some of the things that you might have assumed that were a surprise to you? And also, what would you, if you could go back in time, or if you were to speak to somebody who was like planning to move here, what would be some of the things that you would offer them as advice, if any?
The first thing I tell people, that America is really big. It's huge. Each state almost is like a different country, can be. And kind of you have to take, and then in each state you can have different regions that also have very different cultures. And that's one thing that never, including America, and also this is my advice to Americans about the other countries, just don't assume that one country is just one homogeneous place, that everything is same wherever you go. It's not. And it's the same in America. In America itself, as I said, states are different, but even in Washington state itself, west and east are different. So that's one thing that you should be familiar. If you want to move to America, know which state you're going, and if you're looking for something specific, do you want nature, or do you want a certain type of culture? This is going to be very different going. So that's the first thing that I would usually say, both to Americans and non-Americans.
No, it's true. A lot of people don't leave. No, it's true. And it is a melting pot. I mean, some people just think it's a cliche, but it's not.
No.
It is an amazing amount of people from all over the world.
It's my favorite thing about America, that I can just leave right now, go downtown, and be exposed to all kinds of different food first, but just languages, just walking down the street, you hear all these different languages and there's different types of clothing, and that's just so amazing. And I look at my son, I'm like, you're so lucky that you're gonna grow up seeing this. I didn't. So it's that's the best thing about America that I love, and I'm hoping that to me it looks like it's just gonna get better from that. I think it's just gonna get more diverse and more, and that's something to look forward to.
Yes. Even though it's a difficult time on many different levels, and I don't want the comments to just blow up like, yes, it's a difficult time. But as an immigrant, you kind of like have to be hopeful. You really do, because you know where you've been, but also you've moved, and so even that moving, it's a big country, as you say, but as soon as you do the move, whether it's just around your state, as soon as you're just moving your body around and driving or flying or whatever, it gives you a sense of hope. And I think within like from an immigrant perspective, that's like such a vital part to keep that going. Let's hear another song. This is great. Salome MC, Immigrant Songs, KEXP, live at home.
بزرگترین گناهه کشتن امید دل قاتل بودونی که کشت امید دوستی که گفت این جمله رو باطل بودن قدم تو این راه هر سخن و هر فعل نکنیم آب رو گل سیاست کثیفه قوت میده درسته پس میده با مغز شسته پشت هرچی کنی چی نمفته خواستیم بریم تو کلوبه بالای کوه بشیم دور ولی نمیشه چون اینجاست که این درد مزمن من میاد از انسان بودن چون در یک شب چراغ امیدم و رو بودن اگه من ساکت باشم اگه من راکت باشم کی بنویسه کی بگه منم اگه این درد مزمن تو میاد از هستی تو چون در یک روز دزدیدن از توشت مستی تو اگه تو ساکت باشی اگه تو راکت باشی کی به نوازه کی بسازه اگه تو تارک قدرت شیطانی که تو دل خزید از قابیل تا جلو تصویر اون تا یزید خیلی ها رو کرد رزیل اگه به من تقدیم کنن قدرت رو بعد از این پس میزنم نشدم از انسانیت تمثیل یک جوون و یک پیر یک زن و یک مرد فرد جمع گردن و شب یک ملت خفت داره اگه بکنی قفلت از صدای یک دست علت ذلت قدرت‌های تاریخی بوده با این ملت میگه نه به فساد میگه نه به سانسور میگه نه به کشتار میگه نه به جنگا میگه نه به اعدام میگه نه میگه آره به مردم داری نه مردم خاری میگه این درد مزمن من میاد از انسان بودن چون در یک شب چراغ امیدم و رو بودن اگه من ساکت باشم اگه من راکت باشم کی بنویسه کی بگه منم اگه این درد مزمن تو میاد از هستی تو چون در یک روز دزدیدن از توشت مستی تو اگه تو ساکت باشی اگه تو راکت باشی کی به نوازه کی بسازه اگه تو تارک سکوت مسرزش بی غمای بی خبره و پشت قدرت طلبان به همینشون گرمه و کور شده وجدانشون به دست خودخواهیشون با زور استوار ستون شاهنشاهیشون ولی وقتی به خیالش میره بالاتر داره میفته بالتر به تحت سعتر میشه دلش چی نرمش نمیکنه آتیش حرسش میسوزه ولی گرمش نمیکنه اگه ملت بخواد دریا شکافته میشه اگه ملت بخواد کیمیا یافته میشه اگه ملت بخواد برنده باخته میشه اگه ملت بخواد این وطن ساخته میشه این درد مزمن من میاد از انسان بودن چون در یک شب چراغ امیدم و رو بودن اگه من ساکت باشم اگه من راکت باشم کی بنویسه کی بگه منم اگه تارک باشم این درد مزمن تو میاد از هستی تو چون در یک روز از توشت دزدیدن مستی تو اگه تو ساکت باشی اگه تو راکت باشی کی به نوازه کی بسازه اگه تو تارک باشی
That is awesome. Salome, MC, KEXP, live at home and part of Immigrant Songs. Thank you for being here. You produce your own work too, right?
Recent work, yes. I started producing maybe last 4 years or so.
Okay.
5 years, yeah.
That's not that recent. 4 years is, that's a career. And you're also working with other artists and helping them produce and create their media. I would say that, you started online and now you're helping other artists create their work and their expression online. Would you say that's correct?
Yes. I mean, I kind of mentor a few younger people just to help them out. It's back in Iran because, it can be overwhelming. It can be hard because there's so many red tapes. So because I navigated them a long time ago, I just kind of easy for me to offer. Yes. So that's one thing. And also just over the years, I've been doing it for almost 20 years. So kind of know things that I like sharing. But certain things, obviously, you have to discover for yourself. But yes, and I also recently started a few new projects. That's just a more bigger projects that also both supporting but also celebrating the Iranian heritage and culture within the hip hop realm, hip hop scene. Yeah.
So I got turned on to Iranian hip hop through Hitchcock. Now he has been at this. He's in Germany right now, correct?
I'm not sure. I thought it was in UK, but haven't spoken to him for a while. Yeah, haven't spoken to him for a while.
And the hip hop scene in Iran is is quite large.
Yes.
And it's we spoke about this, and it's a range of expressions. It's everything from like bling bling, look at me, I am so powerful, to work such as yourself, where you're going deeper into this. I'm not saying you're not celebrating yourself, but it feels like there's a you're processing what is happening to you at the time, and you're super lucky because a lot of people can't. They're like, what is happening to me? I can't create an expression. Mm-hmm. And you're continuing to put that out and continuing to put that work out. And your work is, how are you received in Iran right now? How are you received in your, like, what's your fan base? How is it growing? Are you, now that there's such a hip hop scene, and we talked about culture, Western culture, a lot of happy songs, a lot of love songs, a lot of bling, a lot of cars, a lot of stuff like that. How does your work bubble up in that kind of environment? I'm not making a value judgment. It's just a reality.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm really aware of, how, again, as I said, people who I started with right now, they're all superstars, huge following, huge platform. And the thing is, when I very intentionally branched out really early on, because I realized this is scaring me and this is not good for my creativity, that path. I think different people have different types of creativity and they thrive in different ways. And also why you want to do this. Why are you in this? And again, I think there's different answers to that. And my answer was, I'm living my life and I'm feeling these personal feelings, and everything I write is personal. I want to point that out. Everything I write is personal. You mentioned, micro, macro, and or like different spaces. But at the end of the day, I think all of this is all in one spot, which gives me feelings, personal feelings, and I put them into writing. I put them into music or sometimes other types of artworks I've done, and it's all personal. I don't make separation. Oh, this is political or this is social. It's all personal. These are things that affect me personally, and I like to put it out there for different reasons. But the main reason is very selfish. I just need a channel to just put this out. Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to drive me crazy. And
I wouldn't call it selfish. It's like you have to do that. You're an artist. You have to make. Yes. You have to create work.
Yes, and it's like secondary effects are great too. Maybe you create change. Maybe you're affecting one person who's going to affect another person, and then it's true.
It's true. It doesn't have to be like 1 million followers. It's like the relationship that you have, and everybody out there listening right now. Seriously, if you have 2,000 people that follow you regularly, and that's a really great way. You can actually make a pretty significant change with just that number.
I agree. Yes, I think my fan base has been always small, and then it's growing steadily. And I've kind of tell them, you are my distributors. So you like a song, give it to your grandma, give it to your uncle, give it to your friend. That's how it has been spreading. I don't have a huge, distributor or like platforms or like things like that, but it's really word of mouth that is spreading, and I love that. And I love hearing stories of people coming to me and telling how they heard and how they came across my music.
And the fact that you're representing your culture, whatever that culture may be, but you are Iranian, you've lived in all these different places. It's vital to have that culture represented on the world stage right now, where so that it doesn't get twisted and doesn't get cloudy. You were inspired, so I want to get this video on it. I want to thank you and everything, but you were inspired by this one artist that we both connected on. This artist, he's a hip hop artist he started in like the mid 80s, goes by the name of Paris, and I fell in love with Paris when I started doing college radio and continued to love his work. So when you dropped this, I was like, this is awesome. Tell me about Paris, why this, and why did you choose to do this cover?
Yes, just to give context, we were supposed to make a cover for this show, so I chose one of Paris' songs called Evil. The way I came across, I was writing graffiti before starting rapping, and through that graffiti writing, I met this guy, my friend, who I haven't spoken for such a long time, but he basically had just came back from Canada, and this is early 2000s, and he gave me this CD. And I had a CD player back then. I was just so excited. And it was Paris' album called Sonic Jihad. And I learned pretty much English from that. So I remember sitting with my friend who came from Canada. His English was good, kind of sitting him down and saying, what does he say here? Wait, what does he say here? And I had this like little small Oxford pocket dictionary that I would go through and try to, if I'm hearing something like, oh, this word like could be this, and just looking and trying to actually find by experimentation and see if it's like, this was the whole, so that album means a lot to me, just not only just that I learned about a lot from about American culture and, you know, the what the African American experience, but but apart from that, it was just learned so many English words from it, and it was a big part of my life in that early, when I was kind of rapping myself. And so when I was told that I need to do a cover, I'm like, I haven't done that before. Cover? Like, I'm a hip hop artist, what do you cover?
Perfect circle.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know what, I should do Paris. And considering things that are happening right now with the, you know, the people out there in the streets, and this is something that I experienced in Iran back in 2009. The song that we just listened to is the song that I made in 2009 actually, but after we had huge protests in the streets after an election fraud. But you know, the words are just so timeless all the time, because things like that are happening all the time. So even though it's been more than 10 years, it's still relevant to Iran and other places. And this song is also almost 20 years old, of Paris, but very timely. So I'm like, I have to cover this, and you'll see when you're listening that I changed some of the words. So please go listen to the original one for sure. I had to change some, and then like just, there are some HIV references in there. I changed it a little bit because, there's a pandemic right now, there's a virus, and I didn't want to confuse people. So I changed some stuff. Yes, I changed some stuff. So
okay, perfect. Let's hear it. Salome MC, covering Paris.
It's a guerrilla funk orchestrated counterattack. Formulate and infiltrate them so that people react. See, if I was wicked, I would pick and stick to a plan to rule the world and trick him, this is how it began. See, I'd have to find a way to keep the people enslaved. Behave, teach the babies it's my way or the grave. And start with the body, working labor for free. And give them a fake religion so they worship in me. And see, and when the free labor play out, I'd let it go. But only after I made enough to control. Then I tell them that the afterlife is better than this, and that they should love their enemies when faced with contempt. I'd persist with some history that I will rewrite. In a school system where I'd keep the money too tight. I let them all know just where they belong in my world. Turn the boys into felons, making hookers of girls. Whirled up in my plan, built jails to keep all my prison full of bodies. I've been working for free. See, with ghetto economics in check, I'd keep them broke. Teach them only to respect sports, music and dope. Control the content of lyrics, not only the sound of sex, stop and murder in a song is allowed. Do it right, and I see they try to be like me. Try to be the biggest G up in these murderous streets. I teach manhood means how many women you fuck, how many babies you can make responsibility deduct. Fuck a job, real men are pimps, that's what I teach. And if women wanna trip, then them bitches get beat. I'd see it all through, never lose, I'm pass a new law. Give them 3 strikes so the men are constantly gone. Yeah, if I was evil, they would think I do no wrong. See, it's lethal how I keep them in their place so long. I got my eyes upon you and all the things that you do. Some close their eyes but I can see all the evil surrounding me. So what am I to do when I can see right through? Expose the lies and snatch the sheets. Fight the evil surrounding me. After all said and done, a year and I could afford, I'd concentrate deeply on controlling abroad and think about a way to take control of the land. I'd divide and conquer, murder people en masse. See, to understand, you could witness the plan. I'd sell them all arms while they wonder how the war began. As we pay zero attention, people die, with generations all being lost with no fight. I'd continue with the pain, make it all so plain. I'd manipulate the market for my capital gain. Keep the people broken, confused and underclass. Give my homies all executive bonuses through the crash. And if the heat gets too hot, I'd plant a bomb or wreck a plane just like Hitler back in the day. And scare all the people that forget about me, that forget about elections and the way that we cheat. See me blame it on a foreigner and non-white man. Celebrate my Gestapo with a positive spin. Then manipulate the media, it's US first. Get the stupid stupid ass public to agree with my words. Then I'd make the play, taking all their freedoms away. Incarcerate anybody that will get in my way. Make them censor any media that challenge the mold. Give them bullshitty shows to binge watch and get old. Control the message in the music, it's gangsta for sure. Give them diamonds, never tell them about the conflict zones. Never tell them about the murder in Sierra Leone. Never tell them how the diamonds make a murder their own. It's all too easy, if I was evil that's how I rock it. Make sure that my propaganda won't ever stop it. Got 120 channels but it's nothing to watch. Now 11:55 be the time on the clock, believe.
Perfect. So timely, so timeless, and amazing. Salome MC, live on KEXP at home, part of Immigrant Songs. Thanks for being here. Everybody listening right now, I'll be debuting your new song in just 3 hours on KEXP. KEXP.org on my show Wopop. Huge shout out to everybody on our video and audio team to make this happen, and support KEXP. We're a nonprofit arts organization. We're all going through this. You are not alone. We're all going through very interesting times during these interesting times, and keep it tuned, keep watching, and keep supporting. Peace and take care of yourselves. Really, be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Discover new music at listener-powered KEXP.org.